So on the forum recently, we've had some discussions about the possibility of people changing objects in the community library and this breaking existing patches for other users. So I wanted to actually do a quick demonstration about how we can actually get around this if this happens to you, and how you can continue to use your patch. So here I've got a very small demo. It does nothing really. The important part of it is this object here, which is the TB demo do not use. This is going to actually change in a minute. You can see that this actually has two outputs, a wet and a dry output, which I'm feeding it to my mixer. So if it did something interesting, this would obviously affect the sound. Now what we're going to do is, at this point, I'm going to pretend that this has been committed by another user, and I then come into Axoloti and I do a sync libraries. So I go and get the latest copies, and then when I open up this existing patch, what happens is we suddenly see that my patch has changed. And we can see here now that the do not use has only got one outlet, so I've actually lost the dry outlet. Now this will obviously, this is a trivial example, but it would obviously affect how the patch works. And we can have all sorts of things that can change the way the patches work. So the point is, and also in the log over here, you can see that it actually has indicated that that's gone. So the problem is for the user now is I've got a gig tonight and I want to use that patch, but now I'm lost. How can I carry on? What we want to do is obviously go back and get the previous version. So we are going to do something about this in the next major release, but we can already use the power of the community library and the GitHub to actually deal with this. What you'll first need to do is to download an application called SourceTree, and this can be taken from sourcetreeapp.com. This is actually done by a company called Alsatian. It's a very big company. You can get a Mac version or a Windows version. We can do manually these steps in Linux from the command line as well, but I'm going to show you with the command line. So you download this, it's a free app to use. When you start it, it will ask you to actually register with Atlassian. You can do that, and then also it will ask you to set it up. Once you get past the registration though, just do the skip setup and then start it. And what we'll do then is we come and we start SourceTree, and you'll be presented with this window here, which basically is saying it now wants to look at a repository. Now what we want to do is we actually want to look at the contributors repository, and we actually want to access that. So what we do is we come into where your patches etc. are stored in your documents folder, same under Windows. You grab the Axoloti contrib directory and you just drag that into Alsatian. We can then close that window. Now we can see here importantly that it says Axoloti contrib, and we can see that it says the version number of Axoloti, which is 1.01, which means it's actually identified it. If we double click on this, we can actually now see we can do lots of things with this application. It's a very powerful application. But what we're basically looking at here is this top part here indicates the changes that have happened. So you can see there have been two changes, which were me today, and then other changes through history. And we can look at this. If we actually click on them, we can actually see what the changes were. So for example, you can see where I've clicked on this one, it's got a green indicator which shows that I added the object. And this was when I created this do not use object. And then if we click on this entry, we can see it's orange, which basically means it's changed. And actually over here, it will tell you what the change is, which you can see is I dropped the dry element. But that's not important. The most important thing for the user and how we're going to fix this issue is basically we want to go back to a point where we where the object is as we expected it to be. Now that might be that you knew that you synced it yesterday or last week, in which case you could use a time, or you could go back through the history and actually find whichever objects it were that's changed, and you can find that point. So you're basically saying, to what point back in time do I want to go? So in this example, I want to go back to this previous. So we're currently here where it's highlighted, and that's what we're looking at. So what we want to do is we want to go back in time to this previous thing, and we can just do that by double clicking on here, and it will give you this warning. It'll say it's going to change your working copy. Are you sure you want to do this? And it talks about head, being a detached head. We say okay, because we know that is fine. Now, what that means now is that Axoloti will now see the object as if it was at that time. So now what we can do is we can come back and we can actually just directly open up our patch again. And magically, sorry, no, we can't do this. Sorry, we need to reload our objects. Yeah, because we need to reload our objects. We then come back, we magically open up the patch, and voila, we've got back our dry signal. So now the question is, we can't actually stay at that old history in time because we might want new objects, etc. So what we need to do is to take some action so that I can work on the gig tonight without any problems. Now I actually have two choices here. The first choice is that I could embed this object as a patch. I mean, we can actually see this. If I come here, if I in fact copy and paste it, we can embed this object as a patch, and then I could obviously carry on using it. I could do this in place as well, but I'm just doing it. The other option, if we've got a lot of places where we're using this object, so say we're using this object in 20 different places, so I don't want to embed them all, and I later want to be able to change them back easily. What we can do is come into here and we edit the object, and we come up to the options up here and we do copy to library. And what we're going to do is we're going to copy it to our home library. That's our local library. Do not copy it to the contributions library. If you do, you will get problems when you try to sync your library next time. So copy it to your local library. So I'm just going to call it here temporary do not use. So I'll give it the same do not to use. So I'm going to give it the same name. Okay. And now what we can do is we can actually replace this object with home temporary do not use. Okay. And now the patch will work absolutely fine. Now, what we want to now do is we can now save this patch as it is, or we can save it as a copy. We could save a copy as well, but let's save the patch as it is, which I've just done. We can close the patch. Now what we need to do is we now need to go back into history. Now, I'm going to show you, if you forget to do this step over here, we do this by basically double clicking on here. It's as simple as that. But I will show you, I'll go back a minute. If you forget to do this and you come into Axoloti, the next time you do sync libraries, it won't work. You will get an error. A nice big error here. The actual important part of this error is, as you can see here, this part which it says the head is detached. That means that you're basically not looking at the current version at the time. So you launch SourceTree again, and you basically just double click on here, and now we can close SourceTree. We're uninterested in this now. We've done our thing. If we now do sync libraries, we will see that it'll work perfectly happily. And now what we can do is we can actually go back and we can open our previous patch, and of course it's perfectly usable because we're using either the embedded version that I created down here or the local version I created here. Of course, over time, I may then want to actually go back to the official version and then modify my patch to take into account the fact that this object has changed. Or I can carry on using the other object, it doesn't matter. But the point is, I'm ready for the gig tonight. No harm done, and it's a fairly simple and painless operation. That's all I wanted to show. As I said, we will actually be streamlining this in future versions of Axoloti, but I thought it was worthwhile spending some time showing how you can get around this issue if it does occur to you with the current version of Axoloti. Thank you and have a nice day.